Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome back to another episode of Who's Who P100 Profiles, brought to you by the Muslim American Society. I am your host, Abdusalam Dawood Marshall, and we've got another great show for you today. Now, if you're anything like me, you spend a lot of sleepless nights thinking about the impending robot revolution. Well, our guest this month says, worry no more. Here to talk to us about his work in artificial intelligence is a man of genuine intelligence, Hashim Mir, who works on the self-driving technology components at Google. Welcome, brother Hashim. Assalamu alaikum.
Walaikum assalam wa rahmatullah, bro.
It's
Very nice
great.
to meet you. How are you?
Alhamdulillah, it's wonderful to have you on the program. I've heard so much about your work and about this fascinating area.
Yeah, it's definitely an area of excitement, and I think people are very eager to be like, when can I get my hands on this self-driving technology? And I'm excited to talk to you about it today, inshallah.
Wonderful. I want to hear all about it. But first, maybe just let's start off with basics. In terms that a fourth grader can understand, tell us about your current role at Google and what you do there.
Sure. So I'll try to describe it in a way that I like without getting into like too many details that I'm not allowed to. But basically, Waymo is this unit which was originally a self-driving car project, and it's now it's like its own company under Alphabet, which is trying to bring self-driving technology to the world through a couple of different means. So we have a trucking division, and then we have our primary, I guess, focus is bringing an Uber-like service to to the world, basically. So you can imagine, for example, just like an Uber-like app, you request a ride, except the car that picks you up, there's no driver. And so we went and tested this out in Phoenix, where we actually have like a pilot service running. It was one of the craziest experiences ever, even though like you get to like go like on test drives all the time when we're working on it. There's always like a safety driver in there. But when I went to Phoenix, we actually have some capacity of completely driverless cars. And so it was actually a really cool experience where, we requested a trip, the car comes, there's no driver, we hop inside and it takes us to wherever we need to go. So and my role in that, I actually work as a software engineer on sort of the back end and some of the systems that communicate with the car. So, telling it how to coordinate, how to figure out like which customer to pick up and where to go. And then also like some of the modules on board the car that deal with like at a high level, like, interacting with the user and figuring out where to go next.
SubhanAllah. So you're there, you're helping to build the back end of this technology. You've also been at the forefront of experiencing it yourself. This is, as I joked in the beginning, we've got these kind of apocalyptic visions sometimes of like the robot future, and there are a lot of anxieties about that. How would you address fears that folks have, everything from safety to how this is going to affect jobs?
Yeah, those are really, really good questions. I'm by no means an expert on answering any of these questions, but you hear bits and pieces as you're just working in the industry about all of these concerns, and this is something that comes up at even like internally at Waymo, like what's our bar for safety? We have to make sure that whatever we do, like it has to be like safety is at the forefront of it, because I think one of the risks actually in the industry is all it takes is one company to be reckless, or to be not even reckless, but like not have a very, very high bar for safety, and that could result in very catastrophic like results for the entire industry. And so one of the reasons that self-driving cars take so long to roll out into the world is you can't just sort of say like, oh, like this is good enough. You need to be like, we need to think about like every single sort of like edge case, every single sort of like 1 in like 0.0001% possibility, and be certain that, okay, no, this is something that we've ruled out now. And so, we have, entire teams at Waymo dealing with simulation and dealing with how is it that we can make sure that beyond at a very, very high level of confidence is our car going to operate in the safest manner possible. And also a lot of times, like if you ever actually hop in a self-driving car, the first thing you'll notice, you'll actually find yourself getting a little bit frustrated because you feel like it's being a little too cautious. Like, oh, there's like a nice like opportunity for a left turn there, But like when you think about like how these things are built out, a lot of it is actually because we want to rule out that really rare and like edge case possibility that like some driver ends up going like 50 over the speed limit, and then so all of that is sort of baked into the software. And that's why, even though it seems to be like overly cautious, this is actually the result of it kind of analyzing every single possible outcome and making sure that we were doing the safest possible thing for our users.
It's amazing. You have to consider every possible outcome, as you said, and I think it's important for folks to remember of just how, first of all, unsafe current driving is, and that this could actually be an improvement on safety.
Yeah, definitely. This is one of the things that makes me really excited about the technology that I work on, is that I think it's a little bit different from the traditional tech product, which is like fail fast, get things shipped, and then like work on like improving it afterwards, that kind of thing. But this has a very, very high bar for even like meeting a launch.
Right.
And then beyond that, I guess like that's one thing that you have to be very careful about. But then like the rewarding part of that is I feel like it's going to be such a life-changing technology, truly. And I feel like the industry has fallen short of their promises a little bit. I feel like they have overpromised in the past, and now like they're starting to be more realistic about their goals. A lot of companies were like, "Oh yeah, we're going to be completely autonomous like in the next by like 2018, 2019." It just keeps getting pushed out, and now we're starting to realize just how complicated of a problem this really is. But at the same time, it's one of those problems that's truly worth solving, even if it takes a really long time.
What is the timeline, do you think? When will autonomous vehicles be a kind of part of our everyday lives?
I wish I knew, and I hesitate to make like any sort of timelines, just because there's so many unknowns after we have certain goals within our own company, but then a lot of those things, like we discover things along the way that make it very difficult for us to um, you know predict those kinds of things. I would say like realistically, in terms of like mass scale adoption, I would like my personal, this is not tied to Waymo at all, but like or Google at all, my personal take would be like maybe like in the next like at least like 7 years it would take us before we had any sort of like realistic sort of usage of it. I know this is probably pretty like pessimistic, but that's just like I think I generally do take a pretty like cautious approach to like making my estimates. And like having seen what's out there, there's obviously a lot of work to be done. At the same time, there's a like an incredible amount of progress to be made. It's just one of those things where you have like a long tail of things that you need to make sure that are perfect before you can really roll it out completely.
I've asked you to kind of prognosticate about the future, but I'd love to hear more about your past and your story and how you got there. You have what for many people is a dream job, like working at the cutting edge of technology, driverless cars with one of the most amazing technology companies in the world, Google. How did you get to where you are?
Yeah, alhamdulillah, I'm truly very grateful for all of the opportunities that I've had. And as Muslims, we recognize that everything that we're given is from Allah and Allah alone. And so I can't claim to say that I've done anything that deserves any of this, but it's the will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala first and foremost. It was very fortunate that I ended up growing up in a community, Waterloo, literally just down the road from an institution which at the time I didn't realize, but it has like is world renowned in terms of its technology education. And so I ended up doing a computer science degree from there, and it's one of the very few universities in Canada which attract a lot of really, really top tier companies. Facebook, Google, any of like the big companies that you find, tech companies especially that you find in the Silicon Valley, they all come to Waterloo to recruit specifically because of Waterloo's renowned reputation, and it also has a very, very strong internship program. And so through that internship program, I ended up getting a few internships, one at Facebook, one at Google. And I also did a few internships in Canada at like BlackBerry, if you remember what that is. And so I compared my experiences at at these Canadian tech companies versus the US tech companies, especially those in the Silicon Valley. And to me, the difference was night and day in terms of just the level of like one, like the caliber of people that you meet. There's some very, very phenomenal people that I've worked with at Google and I continue to work with at Google. And two, like just the ability for them to attract more and more talent. You have talent from all over the world. Like on my team, there's people from Japan, from Korea, from India, from Poland, from America, from Canada, myself. You know, they're all over the world, but they're really, really, truly the smartest people. And that's one thing that I appreciate about the Silicon Valley is it's it's really about like what you are able to achieve as an individual rather than you know, I feel like a lot of industries traditionally it's all about like what connections you have or you know how much you're able to talk. But here it's really about like how talented are you and how hard do you work to make sure that you're able to like you know push technology forward. But you know like from my experiences specifically, I think I was really fortunate. I was uh, raised in a family which very highly valued education, and I had these really really amazing opportunities to work to go to these prestigious institutions, and then end up finding a job here. And one of my goals was always to work at on self-driving cars, and so I started at Google on the Google Assistant team initially, but my goal was always to eventually transition over. And so I actually worked for about a year and a half on the Google Assistant. And then there was a really cool opportunity that opened up on the team that I'm on now, and I've been there ever since. Alhamdulillah.
Alhamdulillah. So what inspired you? I mean, of all the things you'd be working on in Google, of all the things you'd be working on in that kind of technology, what inspired you about the self-driving cars or driverless cars technology?
Well, I think it's one of the areas at Google that's extremely exciting. In my opinion, although I'm biased, it's one of it is the most exciting project at Google. And I feel like I wanted to work on a team that was relatively small, and I feel like Google generally, all the teams are quite big. And so, for example, when I was working on the Google Assistant or when I was working on the ads team as an intern, it was cool. It had its own set of challenges, but a lot of those challenges were born out of maintaining very systems that were designed a long time ago and that kind of had a long, rich history. And I mean, these are phenomenal pieces of engineering. But one thing that I really wanted to work on was being like the person that kind of started out this initiative, and like had all like I feel like there's a completely different set of learnings that you have by joining a team that's small, that's scaling up, versus joining a team that's mature and has a different set of challenges associated with it. And I think I got that at Waymo to a really strong extent because I got to start from like a team that was very, very small, and I was working with very senior engineers. And we, like right at the like when I started out, I was handed this giant project that was like normally would be like a giant team at Google. They're just like, go and build this. And I was like, wow, you're gonna just like, first of all, I was surprised. I was like, you're just gonna let me build this like all on my own. I don't have that much experience either. And they're like, yeah, we have like, we're too busy to just like have, you working on things that are not important or not high impact. So that was one of the unique experiences, and that's one of the things that drew me to a company or to a team like Waymo, which is small and at the same time it had that right combination of being small but also working on some really really challenging problems, and that I felt like facilitated a lot of growth for me professionally.
You get to be on the ground floor of a really impactful project. MashaAllah. Um, we hear a lot about Silicon Valley culture. You mentioned the diverse teams that you work with. What challenges have you faced in your work, and have you faced any particular challenges being an observant Muslim in Silicon Valley?
Yeah, I actually, this is one of the questions that's near and dear to my heart because I think that's what organizations like MAS do a really good job of, is that sure, you have your place in American society, but it's important not to lose your Muslim identity as well. And I think that's one of the things that you have to be very careful of, because I grew up in Toronto, which is a very strong Muslim community. And, when you go to the Silicon Valley, alhamdulillah, they have a very strong Muslim community there as well. But I feel like you face a different set of challenges. For example, one of the things I noticed in Toronto was it's a lot more family oriented because there's a lot of families there. In the Silicon Valley, especially in maybe the circles that I've hung out with, I feel like there's a lot more concentration of young urban professionals. What that kind of results in is a different sort of environment, you could say. You know, it's very like career driven. It's very easy to get sucked into like, what's the next promotion? What's my total comp? You know, a lot you'll find in the Silicon Valley, unfortunately, all of your conversations, whether they're with Muslims or not, they end up kind of gravitating around the same set of topics, especially because a lot of people there are engineers. You don't even have a lot of professional diversity. But on top of that, like I mean, it's truly engineered to be a rat race in some ways. It's truly engineered to be, okay, when's your next promotion? How do you make your next salary bump, all of that stuff. And so that's one of the things that I felt like I had to be more vigilant about as I started working, especially in the Silicon Valley, is making sure that while I, spend an inordinate amount of time of my day, chasing these goals, at the same time, like how do I make sure that I'm not just stagnating as a Muslim? And one of the ways that I felt like I combated that was by surrounding myself with a community of people who themselves are practicing, especially some of my friends at Google, because then I could meet up with them and try to connect back to the faith as much as I can with these people. There's some really, really amazing people in the Bay Area. I met them. Some of them I met through TI Camp. They're really phenomenal role models of mine, and that is like a way of staying grounded in your faith. And then at the end of the day, I mean, besides all the people, I feel like it's really important to know your identity as you go into the workplace, because like to me, it's always been that like Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the one who gives and who takes away. He's the one who bestows honor, and he's the one who bestows disgrace. And so at the end of the day, if I am, whatever my pathway is to achieving all of these goals that I have in mind, if my relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala isn't good, then none of these things will ever come to be. And even if they do come to be, they won't be meaningful in the way that they ought to. And so, I mean, like, I guess this is sort of like going a little bit off tangent, but I just wanted to share like one story in which, being close to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, even though it seems like sometimes it does feel like overly restrictive, at the end of the day, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the one who plans, and he's the best of planners. So for example, I remember when I was interning at Facebook, I was brand new. It was my first time going to California, and I didn't know many people there. And so, I just sort of made dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that I would be connected with a good, strong group of Muslims that I could, so that could help you maintain your faith and remind you of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and remind you of your faith. So I remember like it was the very, very first day, and it was time for me to pray. And I was just looking around for a prayer room. Finally, I found one at Facebook. I went to the prayer room, and then I ended up meeting like this one other brother by the name of Hamdan. Very, very amazing brother. If you're listening to the shout out, Hamdan, like awesome friend of mine. Still very good friends to today. And through him, he was also very new at Facebook. But through him, I ended up just through that one small act of like going to the prayer room to perform like whatever Maghrib, I think it was. I ended up meeting this one person who then connected me with this really rich community of other Muslims that I'm still in touch with to this day. And so sometimes it feels like you're, making quote unquote compromises or sacrifices for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But at the end of the day, we never give up something for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, except that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala rewards abundantly for it. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala doesn't like to put all of these restrictions on us to see us suffer in any way. In fact, these are ways for us to profess our faith to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to show our submission to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and to show him that no matter what position you attain in this world, through Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, at the end of the day, we're subservient to him. And all success and all hardship and everything that is ever going to come befall us is from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And if the entire world, put all of their resources together and they decided, I'm going to make this brother or this sister achieve this like level of, you know, prestige or professional success or whatever it is that you feel like is a goal in your mind, that would never happen unless Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala willed it. And vice versa, if every single person in the world stopped you from achieving a certain thing, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala willed for it to happen, then it's going to happen. And so this is one of those reminders that I feel like you constantly need, because sometimes you feel like you feel like you're at odds. Your career and your faith are at odds. You feel like, oh man, like I have to always carve out time, especially during the winter. I have to carve out time for Salat Dhuhr and Asr. How am I going to do that? Like I have all these meetings and all these deadlines, and people are going to look at me in this way or that way. But at the end of the day, like if you live a life where you're just chasing whatever the dunya, just remember that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the one who controls the dunya as well.
Alhamdulillah. May Allah reward you for staying grounded in your faith, for staying so active in the Muslim community, in the Muslim American society. May Allah reward your parents, your teachers, Brother Hamdan, everyone who helped you to stay grounded. MashaAllah, you've given so many wonderful things to think about, and so much rich advice for other young Muslim professionals, whether they're interested in pursuing a career in Silicon Valley or elsewhere. If you could distill it, though, for us, in our Minute to Win It segment, what's one piece of advice you would give to a young Muslim professional who is striving for success in the deen as well as the dunya?
That is a really good question. There's so many like, you know, pieces of advice that I've thought of, or that come to mind right now. It's going to be hard to pick like just one. Let me think for a second.
Putting you on the spot.
You know, like I think the one thing that's been on my mind lately is make sure that like, you know, like we finished Ramadan just a month ago, and we all have this feeling as we go into the next Ramadan, as we enter Ramadan, being like, oh man, this year I don't know, like I really after Ramadan I kind of just fell off of it. And so I feel like one of the things I'm starting to realize is like the sweetness that we get out of the month of Ramadan. It's because we have this perpetual connection with our Creator. We're spending our nights in worship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We're spending, you know, countless hours reciting Quran, whatever it is that we're doing, that we set these very audacious goals for ourselves. And then if we look at our performance outside of the month of Ramadan, it's just really disappointing. And I say this to myself first and foremost. And so one of the things that I've been doing for me personally after Ramadan is trying to set small daily goals that I can hit. You know, for example, like reciting this amount of Quran every single day. And I feel like because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us that He loves deeds that are performed consistently. And so if you think that you can just finish like Quran in Ramadan and then like kind of neglect it for the rest of the month, that's a really, really dangerous thing to do, because you're actually tricking yourself into believing that you're a good Muslim, but in fact you're neglecting your responsibilities for the rest of the year. And so I think that's one piece of advice that I would give to our amazing Muslim brothers and sisters out there is try to make, you know, even if it's 30 minutes a day, try to make time for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because truly I've noticed a difference in my own days when, you know, for example, I wake up and I recite the dhikr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and all of the prophetic supplications that we were taught. I feel a sense of calmness and serenity. And sometimes I feel stressed out by, you know, work or whatever it is that's on my mind. And then I go in and I recite the Quran, and I, you know, if I do that consistently for a week, and then for example, the next day I miss it, then I feel more stressed. It's truly like a remedy, a medication for our souls. And a lot of our day-to-day stresses that we feel, we can really, you know, remedy those with the prescription Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives us, which is the connection to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We were created for His worship and His worship alone. And so if we have small doses of that throughout the day, throughout the week, then I feel like that truly has a really, really amazing impact on our state of being, on our mentality, on the level of peace that we feel. And even like it kind of relieves a lot of the stresses that we feel on a day-to-day basis.
Barakallah, alhamdulillah. It's so important, those small, consistent good deeds. I want to thank you, Brother Hashim. You've given us so much to think about. I could sit here and talk all day about, first of all, the amazing and inspirational work you're doing at Google, and just how fascinating that is. But also, again, these amazing and inspirational words that you've given us, and this advice. If you will, I would love if you'd honor us. We want to close out the segment, and I know you've got to get back to your important work. Would you honor us with a dua as we close out?
Definitely, inshallah. Allah, whoever is seeking something in your cause and trying to balance it between the dunya and their connection to you, may Allah make it easy for all of us, for every single young urban professional, in whatever industry they are. Ya Allah, protect our youth and protect us, protect our iman as a community, and make us righteous and make our children righteous. ربنا آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار. ربنا فاغفر لنا ذنوبنا وكفر عنا سيئاتنا وتوفنا مع الأبرار. ربنا وآتنا ما وعدتنا على رسلك ولا تخزنا يوم القيامة إنك لا تخلف الميعاد. والعصر إن الإنسان لفي خسر إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر.
Ameen, Ameen, Ya Rab. Jazakallah khairan, Brother Hashim. Thank you so much for joining us, and thanks to all of our listeners and viewers for joining another episode of Who's Who. Remember, it's not who you are today, but who you are striving to be tomorrow. We'll see you next time, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum.
Jazakallah khair, brother.
Iyakum. Assalamu alaikum.